All right, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Mafia podcast, NBA edition. My name is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, and as always, here with my co host, the Fantasy Caveman. Last episode, we discussed our Eastern Conference standings predictions. Today, we will be discussing our Western Conference standing predictions. Should be pretty interesting. This conference is very, very deep, so I think there's a lot to talk about here. So let's kick it off. I think this one's going to be a little unsurprising to a lot of people out there, but in the 15th spot for the Western Conference, I have the Oklahoma City Thunder. And after an
Wow.
entire year of disrespecting them, let's continue the disrespect and keep the good times rolling here. But, I mean, the reality is this is a team with 5,000 first-round picks over the next 6 years. So they're really playing for the future right now. When you look at the starting lineup, a lot's going to be on Shy this year to carry that offensive load because their starting lineup is pretty bad right now. There's just a lot of young question marks, a lot to be determined there. So this is a team that I would be very shocked with the talent in the Western Conference. I'd be shocked if they weren't in last place. I really would be. And I know that's a little crazy to say because, I mean, we probably would have said last year they weren't going to be very good. But, I mean, this is really a roster that does not have a lot of talent at all. So I would be, and I mean, they have a few guys in their starting lineup that are under, what do they have? 3 or 4 of their starting 5 are under 20. Shy's like the second oldest guy in their starting lineup at 22 right now. I mean, this is a really young team, so I think there's going to be a lot of bumps in the road, and it'll be kind of interesting to watch the season play out for them. So I think that's all I have to say.
I mean, yeah, I think the and I also have them at 15. But I think the interest is right. Remember, as of now, they have Trevor Ariza and Al Horford are still on that roster. Now, I think the season is too. They probably both entered the season on the team and playing for some reason. But I think. Yeah, honestly I expect both of them to be gone at some point too, and them to require 25 more draft picks. But I mean, yeah, I mean, so much is, and this I think is where I think this hurt Shy's development a little bit. I mean, he's gonna have so much offensive load on his shoulders that if he powers through this and ends up becoming better, I think he takes a very significant leap. He's just not going to make small steps to improvement. Like, if he powers through this, is able to have a good season, I think we're talking a really big leap. But there's just going to be so much is going to be keyed in on Shy. I just think it's going to be a lot for him to overcome as a player in terms of. Now, for fantasy, he's going to be great, and we mentioned this. He's going to be a great fan. He's going to be a, not saying a triple-double threat, but he's going to average his fair amount of rebounds to go with his points and assists. But
yeah, I mean, call me crazy. I'm actually watching this team a little bit from a fantasy standpoint because there's so many unknowns here. If I asked you right now who the second scoring option is behind Shy, I have no idea. So, I mean, as the season plays out, there might be some guys that
Marcus
develop
Howard.
here. Yeah, I mean, I wish Marcus Howard would go here. That would be great. That's probably an ideal landing spot for him. But so let's go to number 14 then. Who do you have in this spot?
All right. Maybe things start getting a little interesting here. I have the Minnesota Timberwolves at 14.
That's interesting.
It sounds a little. It sounds because you look at the moves. I mean, they got Anthony Edwards in the draft, and they re-signed Beasley to that contract. But I just think, and this is similar to Kyrie Irving when we talk about the Nets, but with Karl Anthony Towns, you got to remember. I read a lot. Maybe I read too much into the personal stuff.
Probably.
But Towns is really dealing with some heavy personal stuff right now, and he's came out and said his number one priority this season is keeping his family healthy. I don't know how committed he is to this upcoming season from a basketball standpoint. So I think that's something you got to keep in mind. But I think the overall is, I think, while I think the Timberwolves can be good down the road, I just don't, with how deep this Western Conference is, I just don't think it's going to be this year. I think it's going to take a while for all these guys to really gel and to guys, because they still are not going to be a good defensive team, I don't think, overall. I mean, they have Towns, who, even if Towns, that if he's a horrible defender for a big man. Now, he doesn't play any defense, and that's concerning for their defensive chance. Anthony Edwards, not exactly known for his defensive ability either. Russell isn't terrible defensively, but he's not that good. So I just don't think they're going to be near the bottom defensively in the league, in my opinion. And I just think they have more fire. They definitely have whoever their bench unit is probably better than the Thunder starting five overall. Yeah. Sadly, so they're gonna finish above the Thunder, but I just think they're gonna be so bad defensively, and I just don't see them finishing. Now, maybe they'll finish above my 13th place team, but I have them at 14.
Yep, I have the Timberwolves at 14 as well. For that, you promised this was going to be interesting. You lied to me. But I mean, that is funny that you said their bench unit's better than the Thunder, because as of right now, Ricky Rubio and Anthony Edwards are coming off the bench, and that's way better than the Thunder right off the bat. But yeah, I mean, it's weird to say that this team has 3 potential all-star level players. Anthony Edwards is young and not there, but he has that upside. And this team is still that bad. I mean, I don't know what that says about the Minnesota Timberwolves. I do. It means they're poorly run and have no idea what they're doing. But, I mean, yeah, it's just defensively they're going to be terrible. I don't think that D'Angelo Russell, Anthony Edwards, and Karl Anthony Towns are going to mesh well at all. So I don't see a lot of. It's weird. There should be a lot of hope. There's young all-star potential, but I just can't see them putting it together. So I think it's going to be another tough season for them. So let's go to number 13, and I'm assuming we have the same team here as well.
Yep, I have the Sacramento Kings.
Yes, we do.
Oh, we're shocked. God. This is even less interesting than the Eastern Conference. And for the record, we did not talk about our standings before we recorded. I know sometimes we kind of talk about, our content that we're recording, but we did not talk about these. I mean, De'Aaron Fox got paid. I think that's encouraging. I think. And then you got Buddy Hield and Halliburton, how that's gonna work out. I think that's gonna be a tricky situation for them to navigate. Buddy Hield's been trashing the team all offseason. I think he's really wanted out, and I still question whether he's with the team the entire year. We'll have to wait and see on that. But they got hopefully you got Bagley. Hopefully Bagley stays healthy and takes a step forward. But they just don't. They just don't. Similar to the Timberwolves, they just don't have. They don't play that great a defense, and they don't really have much offensively if you really look at it. I mean, obviously De'Aaron Fox is obviously their number one guy, but aside from De'Aaron Fox, do you really trust anybody else to really?
I do.
Be relied on offensively? I mean, what do you think? You said you have the same team, so what do you think about the Kings here?
Well, I'll say something that'll probably surprise you.
Okay.
They allowed the 7th fewest points last year in the Western Conference.
Oh, all right.
So they were in the upper half. So their defensive presence was much better last year,
Okay.
which isn't overly surprising to me because that's kind of Luke Walton's philosophy. And I actually think that Luke Walton has a lot of potential himself as a head coach, but I didn't want to put the Kings this low. And I did, and I haven't mentioned this episode, but I actually went through and projected every game for the entire season because that's what my life is right now. But I like the Kings actually. I like Luke Walton as the head coach. I like their starting five with De'Aaron Fox and Bagley, Rashawn Holmes with the addition of Halliburton and Belika off the bench and Hassan Whiteside, Harrison Barnes. They drafted Jamias Ramsey later on. So actually I kind of like this team and how they're constructed. I think they're going to be very solid defensively actually. But for me, the difference here is the Western Conference is good. I mean, that's all it is. In the Eastern Conference, I may have snuck the Kings into the playoffs, and I think that's all you need to know about the talent level of the Western Conference and how deep it is. Is
Don't
I
have.
really like the Kings. I think De'Aaron Fox can be a potential superstar. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point. He'll at least, I think, be a solid all-star year in and year out. But just talent wise, there's not many teams in the Western Conference that don't have a superstar. And I think at this point the Kings are one of them, which kind of is going to drive them down a little bit. But don't be surprised if they surprise people. I think they're going to be better defensively than people think. I think
Okay.
they have a lot of depth, a lot of youth that could really come together. But I'm going to put them at 13, but I'm not happy about it.
Oh, okay. All
And I
right.
know that makes a big difference, but
Yep.
you're not going to like my next few here, so we'll go
Okay.
to number 12.
Well, then based on what you just said, we probably our similarities probably end there for a while.
Probably.
Uh, at 12, I have the Memphis Grizzlies. And that sound, I mean, that maybe that's a little disrespectful because they almost made the playoffs last year. They were kind of right there with the Portland Trailblazers who edged them out. But I think for me, this comes down to you got Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson. One of the most exciting young duos in the league, I would say. Ja Morant. I think Ja Morant can definitely take. He's not a superstar yet by any means, but I think he has the potential to get there sooner than people think. But you think of outside Jaren Jackson and Ja Morant, like maybe Dylan Brooks isn't bad, but outside of let's say you include Dylan Brooks, like outside of that, they really don't have anything to really move the needle or really do much. And it sucks.
Jonas.
Oh yeah.
Valchikonis.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, see how much of a difference he makes. But and it feels weird talking about the Memphis Grizzlies because I'm sure you remember the kind of the grinded out days with Zach Randolph and Mike Conley. It's crazy to think. It's crazy to think how far away that was. Like how far away that was. I mean, this team is just a complete 360 difference from what that team was. I just think the Western Conference, I think they get eaten up a bit, and much like you said about the Kings, I think if the Grizzlies were in the East, I think they'd be much better than 12th. I have them here, but I think the West is too strong. I think there's too many teams. I just don't think they have enough firepower outside of Morant and Jaren Jackson to really do much. So that's why I have them at 12.
Yep. Okay, well, this one's going to be not exciting either because I had the Grizzlies at 12 as well. So
we'll have a different one eventually.
Yeah, the next one will be different. I can guarantee that. But yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything you said. I mean, they'll be okay defensively. It's just once again, and it's repetitive, but the top end of the Western Conference is just too good. I mean, I can't see the Grizzlies being better than a team like the Rockets as long as James Harden is there, the Mavericks with Luka, or even the Pelicans with Zion and Brandon Ingram. Just all these teams have too much star power, and I think Ja Morant is going to be a superstar. I think similar different than De'Aaron Fox. I think De'Aaron Fox will at least be an all-star player. I don't know if he'll ever take that next jump. I do think Ja Morant will take that next jump eventually and be a superstar caliber player. But just as of right now, it's a young team. I don't think that they have enough depth or overall talent to make a huge jump in the Western Conference, especially when you even look at a team like the Suns that made big moves and are probably going to launch themselves much ahead of the Grizzlies this season. So yeah, I have the Grizzlies here as well. So let's go number 11 then.
All right, and this is where I think it gets interesting because you mentioned this before, and I have the San Antonio Spurs at 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're probably not the happiest to hear that, but the reality of the situation is that the Spurs have very, very, very little talent on their team. They still have Greg Popovich, who's obviously the longest tenured coach and gonna go down as one of the greatest, or if not if not the greatest coach of all time. But the reality is that, I mean, you have DeJounte Murray, who I think, well, I don't think DeJounte Murray is a type. He's never going to be a superstar, especially in that Spurs system. But I think he has the potential to maybe sneak an All-Star game or two into his career, maybe if he's with San Antonio. But they just don't have, and it just comes down to a lack of talent. I mean, yeah, DeRozan's still there, and 95-year-old LaMarcus Aldridge is still hanging around. But they don't have a lot. They really don't have any offensive firepower. I mean, since it's a Greg Popovich ran team, they don't play terrible defense. They play solid. They play decent defense, but they're just. I think I'm giving them 11th out of respect for Popovich, is why I don't have them lower. Like, I don't have them below the Kings or the Timberwolves, is because the Greg Popovich factor automatically knocks them up a few spots. But I'd be very surprised if they made the top 10. I just don't think they have the talent or anybody to really vault them into that tier.
All right, Caveman. I have the Pelicans next. I'm sorry, but one of the things when they hired Stan Van Gundy was they said he was there to develop that team. And it's not that I don't think that the Pelicans down the road are going. And I mean, don't get me wrong. If they made the playoffs, I wouldn't be like, oh my God, how'd that happen? I mean, they have the talent to do it, but this is a very, very, very young team still. They really struggled defensively last year, and I think a guy like Eric Bledsoe can help them out in that regard. But the reality is this is just a really young team right now. I just very rarely do you see a team in a developmental phase like this go from, they were 13th last year all the way to like the 5th seed in the Western Conference. So, I mean, maybe they finish higher and they sneak in as one of the last seeds, but I think this is a team that's going to be really fun to watch. Don't get me wrong. But I think defensively they're not going to be quite there yet. And I think they're going to need some time to gel together as a young team. So I have them at number 11. Since you just talked about the actually, go ahead. You can go ahead. That's all I have to say about them. Yeah.
Okay. We're at 10 now, right?
Oh, you said you're okay. I'm confusing myself now because
I knew my 11. So
yeah. Okay. I'll talk about my 10 then because it's the Spurs, and you just talked about the Spurs.
Okay.
Now, I wanted to have the Spurs lower, honestly, because as you mentioned, when you look at their roster, it's pretty not great, to be very polite about it. And I've actually liked Devin Vassell so far in this preseason, and I really hope they give him an opportunity to play, because Greg Popovich is usually very conservative with these young players, but Vassell looks like he's ready to play, and they just need to let him roll. But the reason that I just can't put them lower is last year they were 11th, and they were only 2.5 games out of a playoff spot, and they didn't have DeRozan and Aldridge for a big piece of the season towards the back end in the bubble. So, I mean, this is a team that looks like they're going to be more healthy this year. A lot of those young guys looked pretty solid in the bubble. Lonnie Walker was getting more minutes, and Keldon Johnson. So we'll see if they can continue to develop. But I just couldn't put them below 10 because I think that their roster, as much as it's not great, it's better than last year, and they're only 2.5 games out of the playoffs. So, I mean, it's hard for me to put them any lower. I mean, based on their roster, I could argue this is a bottom 5 team just in the whole league, just in general. I mean, I really think that their roster, when you look at it, is really that void of talent as a whole. And Aldridge is older now. DeRozan is solid, and Murray is a great defender. But beyond that, you just have a bunch of question marks. So,
they inked Jacob Podol to a decent deal.
Yeah, screw that. I mean, he'll be their starting center. No, he's a good defender. I mean, he's such a Spurs center. It reminds me of back in the day. They used to have Rasho and Nesterovic, who was their starting center.
Okay, I'm not that great of a Spurs knowledge guy. Yes. I have no idea who that is.
When they won championships, their starting center, they would play Tim Duncan next to Rasho Nesterovic. So I think Jacob Podol's kind of like that, except they don't have Tim Duncan, so it's a little different. But yeah, so I have them at 10. Who do you have at 10?
All right, I have the Phoenix Suns at 10.
Whoa, okay, that's bold.
Now, I wanted to put them in the playoffs. I really did. I love the offseason that.
Obviously not.
But I mean, I just don't know how much this is gonna help them into becoming a play. I mean, Chris. We saw what Chris Paul did with Shai last year.
I know.
Man, and I already know, based on your reaction, you have them in the playoffs.
So, I have them high.
Man, this is really gonna be something. I'm just not buying it for this immediate impact. Like, I don't. Similar to why I had the Nets kind of lower in the Eastern Conference at 7. I think it's a similar. You have Ayton and you have Booker and you have Paul, but I don't think they have a ton of depth outside that. I think a lot of it's gonna be dependent on those three. I can already tell that you're chomping at the bit there. You wanna say something about me having to shut down at 10?
Genuinely surprised, honestly, because let me ask you just a very simple question.
Okay.
The Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay.
Were the 5th seed last year in the Western Conference.
They were, yes.
The Phoenix Suns are more talented than the Thunder were last year. And it's not even close. That's where I'm like, I can't see them not making the playoff. I mean, you mentioned it, what Chris Paul did, and the Thunder's roster, and I know we kept bashing them last year, but it was not that good. It really wasn't. And they have 3 all-star players, plus when you add in Jay Crowder, they brought back Saric, who was really good in the bubble, and Cameron Payne, and they drafted Jalen Smith. I mean, they don't have great depth. I'm not going to sit here and say, they go 13 deep. But, I mean, just their talent level is pretty off the hook. And DeAndre Ayton, towards the end of last season, started to look like a number 1 overall pick. And that's a scary proposition when you have a pick-and-roll game with Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. And Devin Booker, who I think has MVP level upside in his career. That's just too much talent for me not to put him in there. So I'm genuinely surprised. I didn't think you would have them as high as I do, but I am genuinely surprised to hear that you don't have them in the playoffs. I really am.
I wanted to, but the next couple teams, I couldn't see.
So we're gonna have a lot of interest. Intrigue.
Now we see when we're talking about how our West is gonna be much more interesting.
But okay, who do you have at number 9? I'm afraid to ask.
Did you talk about your 10? Did you talk about your 10?
Oh wait, the Spurs. Yeah.
Yeah, the Spurs. Okay.
Yep, they were my 10. So I'm gonna let you go first because I want to hear this ridiculousness. Because I know you have the Pelicans in the playoffs, so we're gonna have a few different playoff teams.
And this is where you're going to be shocked. I have the Pelicans at 9.
No, you don't. You
I'm not even lying.
It.
I have Pelicans
Change
at
it.
9.
Change
I'm not lying. And this man was just like the hardest pill I had to swallow when I was doing this. And I think a lot of my optimism before this was the fact I did not expect them to hire Stan Van Gundy as their coach. I think I don't see the great developmental guy that he's supposed to be. I mean, I don't see it. I mean, as much as while I do think the Drew Holiday trade was good for their future, I think it makes them worse this year.
Okay.
I mean, not to knock Eric Bledsoe. I think he's going to be a very solid defender for him. Although I think it hurts them to lose the Drew Holiday caliber defender and to have Eric Bledsoe there instead. And then I really did not like their Kira Lewis draft pick. I think that was definitely did not think that was the right move. I don't even know how Kira Lewis is going to see the floor. To be honest with you, I mean, obviously, I've been on the record. I love the Pelicans' future going for. I mean, if they get rid of Stan Van Gundy, if they realize that he was the wrong decision. But that was one of the saddest days of my life when they hired Stan Van Gundy. I was so sad. Because I love this team, and I honestly think they should have retained Alvin Gentry. I think he had the team going in the right direction, but if they still had Alvin Gentry, I would have projected them in the top 5. But I think nothing of Stan Van Gundy as a head coach, and I have no hope.
What if they hired Billy Donovan?
Top 3.
Okay.
Billy Donovan with this roster? I mean, come on now. Even you would.
That's who I thought they should have been aggressive to go after, and I don't know why Billy Donovan.
I honestly, that's the Stan Van Gundy. I mean, I think they're going to be. I think now they could fight for a playoff spot, and they might have the best young talent in the league with Lonzo and Ingram and Zion, and Kira Lewis isn't going to see the floor a lot, but he's still a decent young piece. But yeah, I have them at 9. I hated this. I hated doing it this low, but I think it's more of that little is Stan Van Gundy as a coach that I have him down this low.
I mean, I would say that I'm surprised, but no, I'm surprised. I mean, so you've known me like a year now. I don't know if you've ever surprised me as much as you have in the last 5 minutes. If we're being honest, I am just like genuinely.
It's all because of Stan Van Gundy. I'm just gonna say that it's nothing to do with the players on their team. It's all Stan Van Gundy. Horrible fit.
Okay, so I'm really struggling here.
Okay.
Because the 2 teams that had an 8 and 9, I don't know. I'm just very much struggling with this because the Western Conference is too challenging, and I think we should just cut this up.
I have a feeling I know where you're gonna go with this number 9 seed.
It's not the Rockets.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have the Portland Trailblazers.
Yeah, that's what I figured. That's where you were going. And this is where we're definitely gonna. I'm not gonna mention the Trailblazers name for a while yet. So go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel good about it, though. I mean, so they were a borderline playoff team last year. They were the 8 seed. This is tough for me. I mean, they were the worst defensive team in the playoffs last year. They allowed the 3rd most points in the Western Conference last year. So that's a big deciding factor for me. Honestly, I was between letting them or the Rockets out of the playoffs, if we're being honest about it. And if James Harden moves on, then I'd 100% have the Rockets out of the playoffs. I don't even care what they get in return, honestly. I think the Western Conference is so good right now that I'd take them out immediately. But that defensive those defensive struggles do worry me a little bit, but I mean, I like some of the moves they made. That's why it doesn't make me feel great. They brought in Derek Jones Jr., who's a pretty solid defender. Nurkic is going to be healthy this season, and he didn't get to play much last year. And at the 5 spot, that can make a big difference for him. So I do think they're going to be better defensively. I mean, they have a superstar, but I just, as of right now, I had them missing out, and it was really close, like I said, between them and the Rockets. So spoiler alert, that's my number 8 team. I guess I'll talk about that. I mean, the Rockets were also not fantastic defensively last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they weren't.
I don't think we've ever mentioned that before.
Yeah, I mean, that's brand new, but I mean, I really like the moves that they made in the offseason with Christian Wood, DeMarcus Cousins. I think it gives them that size that they were looking for. And I'm sorry, the reality is, as much as I don't like James Harden, his scoring ability and his ability on the floor, you cannot say that James Harden run team will not make the playoffs. I can't do that. I mean, that's the reality, is him by himself. It makes any team a playoff team in any conference. I mean, that's how talented he is offensively. As much as I don't like his defensive ability, I'm very worried. And the reason that I kind of wanted to put them on the outside looking in was because I think that locker room, in a word, is toxic. I mean, all reports seem that way. I think that could have a huge impact on the season, which is why I don't have them higher than the 8th seed. But yeah, I mean, it's hard because I think the Trailblazers are. I don't feel good about it. I really don't. I don't think that that's one that I'm overly confident in, but I'm gonna stick with it.
All right, and this is. I mean, I'm gonna say I also have the Rockets in the 8th.
Okay.
I mean, funny how I haven't mentioned the Trailblazers in name. I wonder when they'll come up for me.
Probably like first.
No. Just spoiler alert. I may or may not have an LA team in first, but.
Oh wow.
But I mean, yeah. I think the reality is, obviously, to start the season, looks like James Harden will be there, and as much as he's probably a cancer to the Rockets at this point. I think he showed up, and I honestly, when somebody first showed me, when I first saw the photo of James Harden when he finally made it back, and he looked fat, I honestly thought it was photoshopped. That's how bad he looked. But I think like you said, as long as James Harden's on the team, who might be the best offensive force that of this generation, just in terms of his scoring ability, that's enough. Now, it might depend on how long James Harden is still with Houston. I don't think he stays with Houston all season, but depending on how long it is, like I say, it's not. Let's say he's with them until the deadline or closer to the deadline. I think that's enough to where obviously depending on the return, I still think it doesn't keep the Rockets out. I think they might build enough of a cushion on the playoff spot. We'll see, but yeah, I can't put them higher. That locker room is, and this is. And before we move on, I think this makes the case of James Harden very curious. At the same, as much as I was complaining before we started about they should trade James Harden already, the reality is James Harden is both good for the Rockets and bad for the Rockets at the same time. And that's just so frustrating because without him, that we're talking let's say James Harden wasn't on the Rockets, I'm probably putting them just above the Thunder. I think he makes that much of a difference. If James Harden, you take James Harden off this Rockets squad and go into the season with everybody else, I honestly think they're probably 14. I think he makes that much of a difference. So
that is very harsh of you to say, but no, I don't necessarily disagree with that. All right, let's go to number 7 here then. I have the Dallas Mavericks at number 7. once again, it's one of those where I consider like, okay, maybe I'll take them out of the playoff equation so I can
I'm
slide in
wanting to for some.
those Portland Trailblazers. I mean, I think it could happen if Porzingis misses a big chunk of the season,
Yeah.
just for the record. Without Porzingis, this is a team that I would 100% swap with the Trailblazers without even consideration. If he misses the first month, I think they'll still be fine. Either way, it's still hard because Luka, similar to James Harden, I don't know if I can put a Luka team out of the playoffs. I mean, I guess I put a Damian Lillard team out of the playoffs, so
And he has another star level guard guy
I
with.
don't like CJ McCollum, but
Wow, he's an all-star. He's an all-star.
I mean, he is literally, yes, he has made an all-star team. But yeah, I mean, with Luka and Tim Hardaway, Josh Richardson, Josh Green, they've added some defensive pieces that should make them better defensively this year. I think the Mavericks will be fine, but like I said, the Porzingis injury does worry me a little bit, and I would probably have them falling out if anything happens. But I think them and the Trailblazers are pretty similar if both these teams are fully healthy. So I have the Mavericks at 7.
That's interesting. I have the Golden State Warriors at 7.
Mm.
And obviously this is post Klay Thompson. The Klay Thompson injury just sucks. Let's call it what it's just because we're talking now. Now we're talking. Warriors went from okay, the dynasty is back to I don't think they're a championship contender.
But they have your boy.
They do, which is why they're still in the playoffs. I think they're. I mean, you have Steph Curry, who is might be the greatest shooter of this of our generation of all time. He's definitely. I think he's an all time. He might be the best shooter of all time. I think you can make that case. But you mean they have, like I said, they have James Wiseman there at center now, locking up the perimeter. They have Andrew Wiggins. They have Kelly Oubre, who you mentioned was my boy. Draymond Green is still gonna be that glue. I think Draymond Green's presence on the team is more important now than ever, possibly with no Klay Thompson. I think Draymond Green is really gonna be key in holding that team together. And I'm sorry, when you have Steph Curry, you have Wiggins and Oubre, three. Well, Curry's a superstar, but you have three, I think, borderline all-star caliber players with him. Then Draymond, who I think, while Draymond's very frustrating to own from a fantasy perspective, I think his value is severely understated on Golden State. So I just can't, with a team led by Steph Curry, they have some solid firepower aside from him. Even without Klay, I think it feels disrespectful to put them out of the playoffs still. So I have them in at 7.
Okay. All right. Number 6 for me then is the Utah Jazz. So
Okay.
not much different from where they were last season. I mean, this is once again an example for me personally. One of the best defensive teams in the league, which slides them in there. But they had some trouble scoring last year, which I think is still going to be a concern heading into this season. This is one of those teams where when we did the free agency recap, they really haven't changed at all. So they were the 6th seed last year, so I think it's logical that not much has changed, and they finished there again. I mean, if they were to improve, it would probably take another big jump from Donovan Mitchell, or maybe. I mean, it could be. Definitely could be. I mean, the Western Conference is strong enough still. Where
they paid him like he's going to.
Yeah, I mean, he could be a superstar still. I still don't have him in that category. He's on the borderline, but yeah. So not much has changed for this team. So I think they're still a good playoff team, very strong defensively. They have some star caliber players that are have big nights for them, but it's just really hard to be a top 5 team in the Western Conference unless you have more scoring punch because the teams that we're going to talk about ahead of them, a lot of scoring punch.
Yeah, I would think that's safe to say. At 6th, I have the Dallas Mavericks at 6th.
Okay.
I mean, I think a lot of this depends on KP's health, like you already mentioned. I mean, from what I'm reading, he might only be out the first couple weeks. I mean, the Mavericks are not really tipping their hand much on when Porzingis might come back, which makes sense. But I love the offseason moves they made. Adding Josh Richardson, good defensively, adding Josh Green, who is my personal favorite, might have been my favorite player coming out of this draft. I just think they made the right. I think they made the right moves to kind of address their weaknesses. Now, despite everything they added, I do think that for the Mavericks to be serious contenders, Luka has to be better defensively. I know they added defensive pieces, but we mentioned this when we were talking about last year. We were talking about the Luka versus Harden MVP debate. Luka was like the 300th rated defender in the league. That's just not. I don't care. I don't care how good of his offensive ability is. They're not going to be championship contenders if Luka is a 300th rated defender again. I mean, I don't care. I mean, I know they added the pieces around him, but I still think he's going to have to step up a little bit on the defensive end if they're going to be truly considered a title contender. But they're definitely heading in the right direction as I had them, which is why I had them slightly better than last year.
Yep. All right. Let's go to number 5 then. There may be a team that I haven't mentioned yet.
There may be a team I haven't mentioned too.
But yeah, I mean, I haven't. The Phoenix Suns, who you had at number 10, that's a pretty big difference, 5 to 10. So I have the Phoenix Suns at 5.
Okay.
Like I said, a big piece for me was when you look at Chris Paul and the Thunder last year, they were the 5th seed, and this team is way more talented than the Thunder.
They do not have Billy Donovan, though.
I was going to say, yes, I do understand they don't have Billy Donovan. Monty Williams is the Suns' head coach. He's not quite Billy Donovan. I don't think they're going to be as great defensively as the Thunder were last year. But, I mean, I really like the addition of Jay Crowder. I mean, he's a guy that is a championship caliber player. He's the kind of guy that people aren't like, oh, Jay Crowder wins you a championship, but he's a very important piece on a championship roster. So I really liked that move. I just think the Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton combination could be really deadly. Really, really deadly. And it's a kind of team, am I going to have them making it far in the playoffs? No, I'll probably have them out in the first round because they are still a pretty young team as a whole when you don't consider Chris Paul. So their lack of experience, I think, would hurt them in the playoffs a little bit. But I just love this talent at the upper end. I think defensively, Chris Paul is going to help improve, and Jay Crowder. That combination alone makes this team at least an average defensive team rather than a bottom 5 like they were last year. So I think when you consider a pretty average defensive team with the offensive firepower that they should have, and I'm assuming that DeAndre Ayton's going to take a big step forward. I think Chris Paul is going to help Devin Booker's development immensely. So I just love this combination, and I think they're going to do big things this year.
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely where we differ, probably them and Trailblazers, who I still haven't mentioned, and I'm still not going to mention them because I have the Utah Jazz at 5. I mean, they're going to be very similar to last year. You kind of already brought up everything about the Jazz. They still have Gobert, who's just a guy in the middle that rebound and block shots, but that's pretty much all he does. Donovan Mitchell, wow. I think this year he could take the superstar leap, depending on how things go. So we'll have to see. I think that pairing, while the chemistry, we'll see. I think the chemistry is at least repaired to the point where they can play well on the court together. But I mean, they're going to still be one of the top teams defensively in Western Conference. They play really good defense. We'll see if a Donovan Mitchell leap is enough to make them better offensively. But I don't think they really did anything to hurt themselves, so they're going to be similar to what they were last year.
Yep. I agree with that. All right, number 4. For me, I have the Los Angeles Clippers.
Okay.
So, I mean, and they were what, the number 2 seed last year?
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the top end here is going to be pretty close once again. This is a team where they've added some depth this year. I think that'll help them out. But I think overall, the biggest theme for me personally is I still don't believe in Paul George and Kawhi as a
They believe it.
tandem. Yeah, I mean, they signed Paul George, so they believe it, but I don't believe this is the best combination for them to win a championship. So, number 4 may seem, I don't know, maybe a little disrespectful, but I think that they'll finish anywhere between 1 and 4. I will say, I think it would be hard for them to finish below 4. I really think that's their floor, but this is a team realistically that is in it to win a championship. That's one of the reasons, as I was predicting the season, I gave them some losses towards the end of the year. Because, I mean, we know that they want to win a championship. There's going to be some games I think they lose throughout the course of the year because they're not fully in it. And we've seen that with Kawhi before throughout the regular season. So I have them at 4.
All right, that's fair. Here's where the Trailblazers run ends.
Oh.
I have them at 4. Now, when you talked about the Blazers, I was waiting for you to mention him, but you didn't. Is that they added Robert Covington?
Yeah.
And you mentioned how they weren't that good defensively. Robert Covington is one of the best 3-and-D players in the league. I remember he played a lot of small ball center for the Rockets.
He did.
That and I don't think the McCollum and Damian Lillard pairing is a championship pairing, but I do think, at least for the regular season, that might be the best regular season backcourt in the league. Debate. You mean you could debate that? You mean John Wall,
about Russell
Westbrook and Russell Westbrook and Beal maybe, but you look at that and then you look into that Carmelo Anthony is going to be their 6th man off the bench. I mean, to Carmelo Anthony, who has definitely revived his career at this point, I think he's going to be one of the best 6th men in the NBA next season. Like his ability to kind of lead that second unit, and I think one of the issues that Portland's had the past couple seasons is that they had nobody on their bench could score. And that's been their issue for the past 5 or 6 seasons. It seems like they didn't have that bench scoring. I think you had a guy like Melo who I think he gives the Blazers their best bench scorer that they've had in quite a while. I think you combine that with Nurkic being back the entire with him being back and kind of being healthy now, Robert Covington, and we talked about it last year when the Blazers were possibly one of the best 8th seeds in history. I think they can make. I think the additions of Covington and then switching Melo to the second unit to give them some bench scoring. I think that's gonna do wonders, and I think this. Maybe I get burned on this a little bit, but I do think I think they have a lot of potential to kind of sneak into the top 4. I think they have that kind of ability to take that league. Damian Lillard is a bona fide superstar in this league. If there was any doubt before their bubble run, there's no doubt anymore, I would say. And I know you don't like CJ McCollum that much. But I think CJ McCollum. I think he's going to be very key for them as well. To kind of especially with no Melo in the starting unit, CJ's going to have to take on even more of a scoring role, which I think he's capable of. So yeah, I have Portland in at 4. So their run ends there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a better chance that you're closer to their standings finish than I am. I will say that. I mean, because that's why I said I didn't love putting them in that spot. And I'm looking back. So the year before last year, so 2018, 2019, they were the third seed in the West. So, I mean, they're not that far removed from being a top tier team in the Western Conference. Now, I would probably argue that the conference as a whole is a little better now. So maybe, but, so you drop them to fourth, fifth. I definitely think it's possible. I don't think that's crazy at all, especially considering the moves that they've made. So, let's see. At number 3, then, I have the Golden State Warriors, who you had at number 7. So 4 spots is pretty significant. I think there's a few levels to this. Number 1, we've never seen a Steph Curry team with a big presence like James Wiseman. I think that's going to have a very big impact on the success of their season. And there's not a lot of pressure on James Wiseman, which I think is great for his career overall. But I honestly think the combination of Andrew Wiggins and Kelly Oubre is not as much together, because you have to consider when they won their championships, their first one with just Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green, before they had Durant. I think the combination of Wiggins and Oubre is better than what they had then. I mean, I don't think people are giving that combo enough credit. I think that they can more than make up for the loss of Klay Thompson. And I don't think people, and I've seen a lot of people kind of have them in that 5th, 6th, 7th range in the playoffs, but I don't think there's enough respect for Steve Kerr and his championship pedigree and the kind of coach I think he could be like Greg Popovich level when it's all said and done. I think he has that kind of ability. And I think one of the other under the radar things about the Warriors last year, that with all their injuries last year, a lot of those young players got some pretty critical moments, and they got to play a lot of minutes, and we saw improvement from guys like Eric Pascal and Damian Lee and Jordan Poole. I mean, they had just random guys playing guards, and some of them showed a lot of improvement. And I would say that since the Warriors dynasty has started, this may be the deepest roster that they've had. Because when they won those championships, they had their starting 5 and maybe a 6th man, and that was about it. And I'm not saying that Kevin Looney, and Eric Pascal and Damian Lee and these names are top end players, but I think their depth is better than what they've had previously. So I think overall that'll help them throughout the course of an entire season with that championship pedigree. I could also argue, similar to the Clippers, this is a team that just wants to win in the playoffs, so maybe they'll kind of just cruise, get a 5th, 6th seed, somewhere around there. But I don't think there's enough respect for what their championship pedigree is, even without Klay Thompson. So
yeah, and
I have.
I will say I think that's the interesting point. Is I think I understand your point of view, and I understand why you have them high. But I also think at the same time, I think people are on very opposite ends of the spectrum on how much missing Klay Thompson is going to hurt this team this year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no Splash Brothers. Come on now. I know Oubre and Wiggins are not bad players. I mean, I personally love Oubre, but he's not Klay Thompson. That's the reality. I mean, are either Wiggins or Oubre going to score 30 points in a quarter?
Yes.
You should bet on that right now.
Both of them will score 30 points in a quarter in the same game.
Okay now. Now, if you put money on that, you'd be a millionaire. But I just think that scoring. I think they're really gonna miss that score. I mean, not saying Oubre.
And defensively.
Yeah, and very one of the best. Because Klay Thompson can guard 1 through 4, arguably, because he's 6'7", 6'8". Like, he's a tall dude. So I think that presence as well. I just think I think they're gonna miss it quite a bit. That's why I had them all the way down to 7. I just think that offensively might not matter that much, but I think it's gonna definitely be defensive end's really gonna be hurting for them. So, all right.
Who do you have at 3 then, right? You didn't say your third?
I did not say my third. So the third is I have the Denver Nuggets at 3.
Oh.
My top 2 are very unexciting. But I mean, the reality is that you talk about the pairing of you talked about the possible the pairing of Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. I think the pairing of Jamal Murray and Jokic is not a bad pairing to say the least. I would say.
No.
Jokic is a superstar. I mean, Jokic is a generational type talent. We haven't seen a big man with point guard skills. That's basically what we have with Jokic now. Is he's a point guard that's a big man, and that's the reality. Jamal Murray is continuing to make those steps, and can Jamal Murray reach superstar status this year? I'm not entirely sure he can do it, but I think he can get close. And if you have a guy that's close to a superstar and a superstar, and not to mention, I think Michael Porter is going to take that leap this year and kind of be that third guy that he was clamoring to be at the end of last season. So I think that trio is going to be dangerous this season. That's the main reason I have them in at 3 now. I think obviously they could flip flop with 2, but for now I have them in at 3.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty reasonable. I have them at number 2, so it's a good segue into that.
Right.
I mean, I talked about them quite a bit just because I love their defensive ability, and Jokic is a game changer on that end as well. So, I mean, really the thing that this team is missing, and they talked about all throughout the playoffs, was they needed that third scoring punch, and Jamal Murray was absolutely incredible during that playoff run, but they were still, yeah, I mean, they didn't have it during the course of the regular season, and they still were the 3 seed last year. So I think if any of those young players are able to take a jump forward, they can definitely finish as a number 2 seed. I will say I'm a little concerned because they did lose Jeremy Grant, who we mentioned. And I know he's not a superstar, not a star, but he's one of those players on a championship team where, when they needed a defensive stop, Jeremy Grant was one of those guys they would rely on one-on-one to guard LeBron, to guard Kawhi, to guard the other team's best player. Jeremy Grant is that good of a defender where maybe he's not going to slow LeBron from scoring, 25 points, but he's definitely not going to let him score 40. I mean, he's definitely going to limit the impact that the other team's best offensive player has. So I'm a little concerned with them losing him. Don't know if the path to making up his defensive presence is currently on the roster because Michael Porter can more than make up for his offensive ability and then some. So I do think they'll be better offensively, but I'm worried that defensively they won't be as strong. But I'm assuming because Michael Porter has a lot of length and he has the ability to defend. So if he can really put the effort in and play team defense in that system, I think they'll be okay. And that's really what I'm relying on here.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, and mention I feel like I talk about this every time with Porter was going to be a top. He was going to be a top lock to be a top 5 pick, and then he obviously the injuries he suffered kind of made him slide a little bit. But they have a top 5 talent on their roster with Jokic and Murray, so I think that trio could be one of the deadliest trios in the league for sure.
Mm-hmm. Number 2, I'm assuming you have the Clippers.
I do have the Clippers. I mean, they had a kind of an interesting offseason. I think they made some moves. They got Luke Kennard from Detroit, who, if Luke Kennard was on Detroit this season, he might be their best offensive player, and that's kind of...
I mean, you're not kidding, though.
I'm actually not kidding. That's sad. But I think on the Clippers, I think he could be a very under-the-radar signing. He shot 42% from 3 last year, Kennard did. So Kennard's definitely a three-point specialist. And then And then I think he's very underrated as he's a solid ball handler as well. Kind of takes some of the pressure off Kawhi and Paul George handling the ball a little bit. And then they did lose Montrezl Harrell, but I think they upgraded with Serge Ibaka. I'd like Serge Ibaka over Montrezl Harrell. Especially you mean come to playoff time, I mean, the whole Clippers team faltered. But Montrezl Harrell definitely did not do great defensively in the playoffs. He definitely struggled a little bit, and Ibaka, while he's not the same force that he was, he's still a very solid defender. And I think he's definitely a defensive upgrade over Montrezl Harrell. So I think that helps him out. And then a guy who I don't I mean, obviously he might not have that big of an impact, but they did take Daniel Oturu. They did have a pick and took Daniel Oturu in the draft. I think he could be a very under the radar guy. I think he can shoot the three a little bit. I think he could be a solid role player for that. But overall, I just think this is a team that the Kawhi Leonard and Paul George pairing, while I'm with you in saying they will never win a championship together, that pairing, I do think they're a good regular season pairing. I think that pairing is going to win them a bunch of games in the regular season. Even if they coast a little bit, and you could say the same thing about the number one team, the Lakers. They're probably going to coast a bit too. So I think their team's good enough, at least in the regular season, to get the 2 spot.
Yep. I think that's reasonable. So, number 1.
Oh, I'm shocked. We're both
Los Angeles Lakers.
We're both there. I'm very surprised we both have them at 1.
I mean, it's hard to have anybody else there. I
honestly cannot see an argument for anybody else at 1. I can't.
And I really wanted to, but I mean, I've even talked about previously that I think that the moves they made this offseason make them even better with Schroeder and Montrezl Harrell. And I think that their team, I mean, they won the championship last year. They were the number 1 seed last year. Now their team is better. I mean, they're in the best conference, but even still, that doesn't make a huge difference for me. So, I mean, it's the Lakers. They're one of the best defensive teams. I think one of the things they were struggling with before, similar with the Nuggets, was having that third scoring punch. But I think they're in a situation now where maybe they still don't have that guy that's going to be their third scoring punch every night, but they kind of have a collection of guys that'll rotate through who's their third.
They have Talen Horton-Tucker, who's been preseason.
Everybody loves that guy.
He's been the preseason MVP.
He's going to apparently change the entire league, so we'll see about. I mean, but yeah, I mean, if he's anything, that still makes their team even deeper than it was last season. So, I mean, we'll see how that plays. I'm kind of interested, honestly, to see how that plays out.
I do. I mean,
I don't think that I have much else to say. I mean,
I really can't. There's not really much you can say. I mean, they added, and as if they didn't need to get better defensively, they added Marc Gasol.
Yeah, Marc Gasol.
They added Marc Gasol and they added Montrezl Harrell. Like, what? Is that even fair? Like,
stupid.
You have Anthony. So you have a front court rotation of Anthony Davis, Marc Gasol, and Montrezl Harrell. Like, come on now. Like, that's just not fair. And that's not even mentioning LeBron, who's playing at MVP caliber level for 25 years now. It seems like. I mean, I can't stand LeBron, but I'm not gonna sit here and disrespect him and saying he's gonna be worse than last year. I don't care if he's a year older. At worst, for me, he's the same as he was last year. Mm-hmm. Which, what he was last year is the same as what he was 10 years ago. So he's been pretty much the same consistent elite force for a long time now, and I don't see that changing at all next year. So. And they're probably going to be. I think they're going to be the number 2 defensive team in the league, but behind the Bucks. And they're gonna be heavy favorites to repeat, and that's just the way it is.
Yep. Yep, I would agree. So I think as a whole, to wrap it up here, the Western Conference, very deep. And we mentioned it earlier on. I mean, a team like the Kings, the Grizzlies, those are teams that in the Eastern Conference I would have had in the playoffs or at least very close. And I mean, you could argue they're the 13th best team in the Western Conference. So this is a conference that's very deep as a whole. Even the Timberwolves, who we mentioned at number 14, I mean, this is a team with three potential stars who could be one of the worst teams in the conference and in the league as a whole. So I think that just speaks to the depth of the conference as a whole and even the differences that we have between the Trailblazers, the Suns, even the Warriors. I think there's a large range of outcomes in this conference, but the reality is the Lakers are still the team to beat, which is kind of
Yeah,
funny to
that's
think
the
about.
reality.
You're like, man,
That's
this
what we
conference
know.
is so good, and anyone could finish anywhere, but the Lakers are probably still going to win. So,
And I think here's the one question I have. If you put the Oklahoma City Thunder, who finished last in the West, would they finish last in the East? Would they finish
yeah,
below the Knicks and the Pistons?
I think so.
I see. I think that little of the Knicks. I honestly think the Thunder would finish ahead of the Knicks.
There's just a lot of question mark. Like I said, I was literally going through the Thunder's depth chart. Shai's 22, Diallo's 22, Basley's 20, Lugnet's Dort is 21. So four of their five starters are 22 or younger.
Hey, they have Horford and Ariza still on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, so Horford's the only one that's not. He's older than 22.
I would say so.
So yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of I mean, like I said, that's why I'm watching them from a fantasy standpoint the first few weeks, because somebody from that group of names that I just mentioned will emerge, and they'll score, 15 points a game.
It's just there's just too much game for only one person to be useful from a fantasy house. But we have no idea. Is it Baisley? Is it Diallo? Is it Dort? Who knows?
Yep. So I guess we're ending on the Thunder then, which is not the direction I was expecting to go. But that was our Western Conference episode. The next one we have coming out will be about our projected award winners. The season is right around the corner, only a few days away. So giving you some content before the season starts, which is exciting. So we appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yep.